Hey everyone, finally the beta version of 2.3 is out. So this is going to be a long video because I'm going to be covering lots of new features and details and changes. But you don't have to watch the whole video from beginning to end. I'm going to be marking each section for each new feature in the description of the video. But please watch the first introductory part because I'm going to be telling some important stuff about the beta and my roadmap through the beta periods and what I'm expecting you to do as beta testers. So this is a beta version, so never forget that you will have issues. There will be things that doesn't work that it used to be. Even if I have been testing this version for almost a year now and been using it in my live gigs, I keep improving it, I make changes in it. It's not tested enough, so there will be issues. I will be working on these issues as you report them to me with your crash reports and bug fixes, and I'll regularly update this beta version, maybe twice a month during this beta period, which I'm hoping will finish by the end of November. I'm planning to release the actual version around Black Friday. So yeah, during this period, I will also be working on the web page, which I've been skipping for almost 2 years now. And also I'll complete the manual during this period. So yeah, as I said, please do not use this during your live gigs, at least for the first month, because the testing need to be done. That's the point of releasing this version as beta. And so you can use it in your rehearsals at your home. And as beta testers, I'm not expecting you to follow a specific procedure. Just use it regularly the way you use the old version. Create new songs, adapt your new songs to the new version with the new features, and test it during your rehearsals at your home, and send me crash reports. So the system has two crash report systems. The KeyStage is using two crash report systems. One, Apple's default crash report system, and there is another one that I added by Firebase, Crashlytics. So when the app crashes, Apple's crash report system will prompt you with a message asking you for the details about the crash and so on and so forth. But so you can use the Apple's crash report system, but those of you who were also beta testers for the previous version can remember that the Apple system have some issues. It wasn't pointing me in the right direction of the crash. So it was even causing some more confusion about how I should approach with resolving the crash. That's why I actually added the new crash report system. The new crash report system works automatically. But the thing is, these crash report system, both of them, send the crash reports to the server as long as your iPad is connected to the internet. So as far as I know, even if iPad is not connected to the internet, when the crash happens, it sends the report the second time you start KeyStage, but you should be connected to the internet at that point. And if it's not connected to the internet at that point, I think it omits it for the next time you start KeyStage. But at some point, you need to have internet for that crash report to go into the server. So I suggest that you use the beta version with internet on, so that the crash report system just goes without any issues. Also, while submitting crash reports or sending me messages about some other issues, not necessarily crashes, but there might be some other issues that are not working properly since there have been so many changes in the course structure. But while sending me those messages or crash reports, please include your KeyStage ID. Now, KeyStage ID is no longer on this bottom bar. I moved things around a bit. So it's actually here now. Here, you see. Let's scroll down. Here's the KeyStage ID. So every time you send me a message, either through the crash report system or direct message, either through Messenger or email, or even if you're asking for a new feature, please send me your KeyStage ID because that helps me track your crashes and the issues that you're having through the Crashlytics crash system. Speaking of new features, so there are lots of new features in this version, but You have been sending me a lot of feature requests throughout the whole period of KeyStage, actually, and I'm thankful for that. Without your feature requests, your suggestions, the KeyStage wouldn't be at this stage. But since there are so many of them, and I try to keep track of them, keep a list of them, I may have skipped some of them in this version because of either it's a big feature that I wasn't able to include in this version, or I may have just skipped it because I was struggling with other issues related to the new version. So there might be some versions that I may have promised you to add to this version, but I may have forgotten it. And I'm so sorry for that. And if that's the case, please remind me about that. And if it's not a big feature, if it won't take me long to include it, I'll try to include it during this beta period and add it to version 2.3. But otherwise, I may have to postpone it for a future big version. So let's start with how you can migrate your songs for your projects from your old previous version of KeyStage. So let's close this. This is the previous version. So most of you already know how to create full backup files by clicking this button and following the prompts. So I already created one here. So all you need to do is just export it, share it into the beta. You can also share single files. You can share your global properties, but this is the most convenient way of sharing your project into the new beta. Now, the thing is, once you restore this version, let me restore it, and I'll explain it during the restoration. Once you restore this version and start opening the song files will be migrated. There will be migration functions converting the song file, adapting the new version. And once that happens, by the way, don't forget to close the original version. Don't run two versions simultaneously on your iPad. Once that happens, once these song files are transformed, you won't be able to open them back in the older version. If you're not going to be using your beta during your live rehearsals, don't forget the fact that the changes that you make here won't work in the older version. So these are not backward compatible. The other thing is, Dropbox is disabled on beta because in the previous beta runs we had some issues when two different versions of KeyStage running on the same iPad have access to the same Dropbox client. You start to have issues. That's why I decided to disable this version, Dropbox in the beta version. Of course, it's going to be re-enabled when the actual version releases. So yeah, so we'll start talking about the new versions, starting with the layer structure. Okay, before I start talking about new features, I want to talk about undo redo. Unfortunately, I had to disable undo redo in this first beta version because it was causing me a lot of problems. For some reason, I still couldn't figure out the problem, but with the chord structural changes, probably there's some conflict with the undo redo operation. So it was causing a lot of crashes. So until I figure out and solve that problem, I have to disable undo redo. Okay, so let's talk about layers, the first big feature that I've been talking about for almost a year now. So what are layers? So layers is basically a third dimension in our user interface. So here's what I mean. So I created a simple song file here with 3 different instruments. Here I type layers, and you can see this is a view very similar to the setlist view. And every song starts with a single layer, including the ones that you import from your old KeyStage. Okay, let's create a new layer. So to do that, I tap edit here, and now I'm in layer edit mode. So all the background just grays out, so I can only edit layers. And here is a plus sign that I can add new layers. So let's add these 3 new layers. And while in edit mode, I can tap on the layer to edit it. Here is the new layer control surface, the layer console. But I'm just going to skip that now. I'm just going to talk about what happens when I add new layers. You realize that the tracks didn't change. We have all the layers use the same tracks. It basically adds a new layer of sections and parts using the same set of tracks. So here, let's say on this layer, I create a part and section here. And let's create this too. Normally when you create a new layer, it just doesn't have any sections or parts. But now we just have something like 3 different song files using the same set of tracks. And if I, for example, I create a new track here, this is actually added to all layers. They use the same tracks. Well, there are things that also changes in tracks between layers, but I'm going to come to that later. But this is the basic structure. And switching between layers is instantaneous, like switching sections. The moment I switch to a new layer, and the note bookkeeping system still works when changing between layers. So for example, I press and hold the note. As you know, when I change to this section, the original sound keeps sounding as long as I keep the note pressed. And the same thing happens. Actually, when I'm changing layers. So if you think about layers as song files, you can now instantaneously switch between them by using this list. And of course, there will be many other ways to switch between layers that I'm going to talk about soon. Let's add a couple of more layers here. Here you can expand and contract, and whenever you put all the way down, it actually scrolls left and right, if it's only a single row. But if it's multiple rows, let me actually change the dimensions here. So the horizontal division, you can change this. For example, you can work it like that, only 3 layers per row. And now this scrolls up and down. If it's all the way at the bottom, it scrolls left and right. So you can use the way you want, and you can close it here and open it. And the block height is the height of each layer. So this is a nice organizational stuff we talked about. Okay, so let's continue how we can organize our songs into different layers. So you can create layers, you can add sections, parts, and tracks on those layers one by one. But of course, you need to do more than that. So to demonstrate, I'm going to open a song file. Let's open this. This is quite a big song file, Live in Spectral Heaven, with lots of tracks and parts. Now, as I said, all songs start with a single layer. Let's just make it like that. So let's create a second layer. Now suppose I want to move some of these sections to the second layer. Let's say this keyboard solo part. All I need to do is I just grab and hold, and move here and release it. And let's do it for the second keyboard solo part as well. And after I move to the second section, I'm going to delete this, causing feedback. So now you see these 2 keyboard parts are moved here. So you can easily move these sections like that to other layers. And within the layer, you can again reorder them. And the same thing works for copying. If you press and hold with 2 fingers and release it here, a copy of it now is moved to this. Now, whenever you move a section and release it on a layer, it adds to the end of that layer. But if you want to actually squeeze that section into 2 sections in that layer, what you need to do is you tap and hold either with 1 finger or 2 fingers, whether you want to copy it or not. You wait here, it blinks, and now it activates that layer. And now I can squeeze it into anywhere I want. So let's just do the opposite way around. I want to move here, wait a bit, and then it activates that layer and just move it like that. And you can do the same thing with parts. The parts doesn't work when you just put it and release on the layer instantly, because KeyStage doesn't know where to edit. You need to go into that layer to do that. So you just grab a part, wait a bit, goes into that layer, and then release it wherever you want. Okay, what else? Okay, let's go into this edit mode. Let's add 2 more layers here. So while we're in edit mode, we can still switch between layers, and you can see now we're in the layer editor. You can name your layers. So I'm just giving a random name, anything, and you can change the color of your layers, just like you change the color of your, other items. And you can add custom translators to layers now. Just add something random. As you know, you can add custom translators for several things, including the song itself, song translators. And now you can add custom translators to layers. And the order in which these custom translators apply is now controlled here. As you know, now there is layer edit here. Okay, back to editing. About this dynamic transpose, dynamic layer, well, I'm going to talk about them later. Let's expand this. So just like tracks, parts, and sections, you can move around layers. Just tap and hold, change the order. Or you can, let's say, this first part, let's create a copy. You can hold and with 2 fingers, release. And now we have 2 copies of that. So all those basic operations on tracks and parts and sections also apply to layers like that. And you can delete them. One thing that you realize is on all these parts, sections, and tracks, there used to be a trash can icon here. Now there is a settings icon, and which opens up a new menu, which brings up our next big new feature. But skipping that right now, there is this delete button, which allows you to delete any of these objects. And the same thing happens for layers. So there was this first part here. So let's delete this layer. So you open up a song file, you can create layers, you can copy your tracks, parts, the sections and parts into different layers, like the way I showed you, or you can copy your layers. But there is another neat feature here. If you go to files and just go to a song, we now have a new option here, add as a new layer. And you simply add that song as a new layer to your existing song. So it's as simple as that. I want to show you one more thing before I go into the dynamic properties, which is the advanced stuff about layers. Now let me create a new set list here. Now, when I select the set list, there is a new option here, create layered song. And the moment I tap that, I have a single song where each layer is the song files in that set list. So you can take your set list and turn them into layered songs by just clicking a single button. Okay, now let's talk about some advanced stuff. Now, when I introduce new features to KeyStage, like this layer structure, especially some big new features, which changes the overall structure of KeyStage, I need to also introduce new options for users to customize their setup based on, for that new feature. And so more features means more new options and more complexity, of course, but always keep this in mind. For most users, you don't even need to delve into those advanced options because it just works. Like, for example, in this case, you just tap on the set list, merge the songs, and the songs just merge. And you just create layers and just work with it, and it just works. But for some of you, some features may not work the way that you intended to work. And you just need to make some customizations for your own setup, and then just you forget about it. So, okay, dynamic properties is one of those options. So with the addition of layers, so if you remember what dynamic properties are, what I mean by dynamic properties is properties of tracks, parts, sections, or anything basically, which change whether if that property changes between sections or not. So remember, so the most basic example is dynamic full states between sections. When this is on, we have the full state option, so we can change the full states between parts. But if this is off, we don't have that option anymore. So a single full state is assigned to this track, and it never changes from section to section. So that's what I mean by dynamic properties. Now we have another dimension added, layers. So now we now have to consider whether those properties, whether they should change when we're switching layers. So that adds another complexity, but the default options will most probably work for most of you. But now I'm going into the details of that. So when I go to song properties here, we have the dynamic properties tab here. And this used to look different. In the previous version, this looks different. And I'll explain why. Right now, the dynamic properties, and there is this additional part between layers. So these are the dynamic properties, whether a property should be dynamic when we change layers. I'm not going to go over all these options here, but I'm going to talk about dynamic layer volume. This is one of the important ones. So when I toggle this on, what happens is the following. If I go to Song Mixer, let's close this layers now. Now we have another channel strip here, layer volume. And now we can change between layers. So you can change the volume, and you don't need to change the song volume. Now the song volume is independent from the layer volume. And the moment you disable this option, it just goes away. Oh, okay, here is another feature. I'm recording this in my room where there's no air conditioning, and since I've been using this for quite a long time, this is a new feature that shows you whether your iPad is heating. The internal iPad system basically notifies KeyStage that the temperature is now, I mean, maybe I should change this from serious to something else. It's not, because this kind of appears a lot, but it's working fine. But if it goes too hot, this turns into red. The system doesn't provide the temperature information, but it just provides 4 different states. Whether the iPad temperature is cool, it's okay, it's warm, and it's too hot. This is the warm state. And when I touch my iPad, it's, the CPU part is kind of warm, but it's not too hot. Maybe I'll just let KeyStage warn you when it's too hot. I'm not sure. Okay, let's go back to the layers, the layer volume. So layer volume is an independent volume, and when I disable it, it just doesn't change the volume in the song viewer, and it disappears. Okay, so this is how you change the volumes of layers. But remember, there was also a section volume. And actually it was here, dynamic properties, activate whether section volume or not. But it's no longer here because now it's here. So each layer has its own dynamic properties for sections. Whether the sections should have different volumes or not, is actually assigned here in the layer. So when I activate this, so it's now activated for this deliverance song, but for this song, it's not activated. So if I go here in the burden and start tapping on sections, dynamic section volume is disabled on these. And when I go into song mixer, it's just the song volume. But if I activate deliverance, go into song mixer, now we have section volume. So the behavior of section volume is the same as the behavior of layer volume, and it's different from the previous version. The section volume doesn't change the song volume anymore. It's just an independent slider. When you double tap, it's basically 0 dB, which means that If I close this layers here, it's 0 dB here, which means it has no effect. It doesn't change. But I can change the section volume between sections now, and without really altering the song volume. Or even if I have layer volume here, now we have all three sliders: section volume, layer volume, and master volume, which is the song volume here. Yeah, I realized that this is pretty annoying. Maybe I should remove this. I'm not sure. We'll see. If you go back here and look at the other dynamic properties, for example, dynamic active unit, dynamic lyrics, dynamic MIDI, all these dynamic properties related to dynamic live console, whether they should change between layers, is controlled here. And within each layer, we have the same options. Whether these options should change within each section. Of course, this overrides the other one. So here's what I mean. So suppose we disabled active units changing on layers. And on this layer, this is also disabled for sections. But on this layer, it's enabled. And let's also disable this for this layer, for the third layer. Let's disable that. So on these two layers, the active units are disabled for sections, and on general, the active unit, dynamic active unit, is disabled between layers. So this means, let's close the global panel. Suppose I change my active unit to info. Within this layer, even if I change the active unit, it just stays. It's not stored on the section. It's just constant throughout the layer. And so, for example, I'm at the media unit right now. I go to the third layer, and since the active unit is not enabled here for sections as well, we're still not changing. So now I'm on XY. But now on burden, so let's say on the first section it's lyrics. On the second section it's info. It's already stored info. On the third it's piano. So on this layer, it's changing. Suppose we're left on this piano, but now I'm going to the first layer and it doesn't change because dynamic active units are not enabled on this layer. So you get the point. Okay. So what are the other properties that we have? So dynamic transpose, now this is a new cool feature, and actually there's more to that. So once I activate dynamic transpose, now the layer has their own transpose. And now with the new version of KeyStage, the notebook keeping system considers transpose as well. So for example, if you tap and hold a chord that move to another layer with a different transpose, you won't get stuck notes because this wasn't the case in the previous version. Okay, I don't want to go too much into the details about all other units. You get the main point. You can change the tempo and time signature between layers and between sections within each layer. But there is more. We have track properties that also have dynamic options. By the way, I realized why I have this present while during this demo. Because of this recorder. Apparently, this recorder in the background is causing a lot of stress on my iPad. Okay, so I was talking about dynamic properties of tracks. Now, if I tap Advanced here, we have a new option here called Dynamic Properties for tracks. And we have now two parts here. Dynamic properties between sections and between layers. So we have these two options here. So dynamic volume, pan, we already know how these works. So dynamic volume, for example, when you disable dynamic volume, the volume slider goes away here. I mean, you can still control the volume, but it doesn't change between sections anymore. And the active button here, so the stored button just goes away. When you enable it, we have the unit volume enabled and with the active button. The same goes with layers. So if this is off, but this is on, let's turn this off as well. And I go here So let's suppose we have this volume up here for B talk. That volume never changes between layers. So if I change it here, it stays the same. But if I have dynamic volume enabled, we don't still have the store button because this is not related to parts. These values are actually stored on different layers of that track. So for example, if I change it here, now we have different volume values for different layers. These options used to be in the song properties, volume, pan, sans, audio unit parameters. But now they can be independently controlled within each track. And for the layers, we have a quite nice set of options. So MIDI inputs, input channels, output channels. So most of these properties here can change between layers now. For example, on the first layer, let's say I'm only using, still there is one more somewhere, yeah, here. Suppose I'm just using main keyboard here. Now here we have a different set of inputs. The dynamic flow space between sections, this option is also can be dynamic between layers. So on this song, you don't want to change the sound or beat talk, but on this song you want to change on this song. So you enable that for that song. Okay, but for this option, dynamic full states between sections should be on between layers. If this is off, this option is static between layers. So if I enable it, it's enabled in all layers. So custom translators is a big option. So now the track has multiple sets of custom translators. So on this part, you may have a set of custom translators, where on this you may have a different set of custom translators. And on this you may choose not to have any. So several options can change between layers, and they can be controlled here, whether they should change or not. There's one cool feature here: bypass layer volume, bypass section volume. Let me show you what it means, bypass layer volume. Actually, I don't want to really show it in this complex song. Let's create a new song and make it simple. And add another layer. Let's demonstrate with 2 layers. Now, suppose I have dynamic layer volume on, and also let me demonstrate with 2 sections as well. And on both of these layers, edit, dynamic section volume is on. So these were the last states for the last layer. So they are actually stored. So whenever you decide on these options, whenever you create a new layer, these are automatically copied. So suppose I turn down the layer volume here. And here, on the second section of the second layer, I increase turn down the section volume. So as I keep changing sections and layers, since the dynamic properties of the volumes are active for both layers and between layers, the volume keeps changing. But suppose for this specific track, you don't want this to happen. What I do is I usually I create an input unit for my in-ear monitoring, which I hear other band members through that input unit. And I don't want the volumes of that input unit change between sections and layers while I'm changing between layers. I want that to be static. So what I do is I enable these 2 options. Now, this doesn't affect this track anymore. The section volume and layer volume doesn't affect. It's always fixed volume. So that's that option. Okay, so much for dynamic properties. You can investigate more, you can ask me. I'll talk about some of these features. Are also some new features that I haven't talked about, like mute audio if there is no part, things like that. I'm going to talk about them later. Okay, I waited for a while between the recordings and then it just goes away. So let's see what happens with this recording. So before I move on to the next big feature, I have a couple of things that I need to talk about layers, a couple of options actually. We have this neat option. So you realize now we have the name of the song / the name of the layer. But you can change this. So you may choose to only show the layer or just the song or both of them. There is a fourth tab here, layer settings. Probably I'll have more options in the future here, but there are three options right now. These first two options are convenient on when you're using this as songs. Move to first section after changing layers. So when I disable this, so for example, I'm on the fourth section here. As long as the layer has 4 or more sections, it stays on the fourth section. One way to use this is what I thought is, instead of using these as different songs, you may use this as different setups within the same song. For example, suppose on the chorus section, I want to temporarily change my setup, temporarily change it, and then move back again. So what I can do here, I can create a copy of this layer and use this as an alternative version of my song. And for example, here I am temporarily changing this to some other sound. So right now, while on the chorus section, I assign a pedal to temporarily change to the second layer. The sound changes, I move back to the first layer and continue. With this option off, you can use it like that. But when this option is on, whenever I change layers, it always moves to the first section. The second one is kind of similar. Connect the first and last sections of adjacent layers while changing sections. Okay, while this is on, when you change sections, either in the live console or using an external controller, when we move to the end of the layer, let's toggle this on. So the next arrow basically moves to the first section of the next layer. And similarly, we're at the end of this layer now. And it doesn't only work with these buttons on the live console, but if you assign a switch pedal to change sections, while you're at, so let's go here, while you're at the end of this, when you press the pedal, you move to the beginning of this. If this option is off, my previous button doesn't work anymore. It doesn't go into the end of the previous layer. Or while I'm at the end of this layer, I cannot go to the next layer. So before talking about this last option here, I'm gonna talk about how to change layers externally, either using a new option here or custom translators. But in the external MIDI control, since as you know we can change sections and songs here, but now there is the middle option, changing layers using a control change number. So this is practically the same thing. Let's MIDI learn this. I'm using this modulation button on my keyboard. I can simply change layers using that. Similarly, here, let's go into song translators. Let me disable this first so that I can demonstrate, because I have only one button on my keyboards, a modulation button. Modulation. In the special events, so move to previous section, next section, move to section at position, previous layer, next layer. So we have now controls for layers as well. Put the trigger range like this. So when I fully press, it moves to the next section. So the custom translators have now the options for layers as well. Like I can go to a specific layer position, previous layer. In the scripts, there are even more options, but I'm gonna shoot a separate video about scripts anyway. I'm just gonna switch back to this option here. Now I can talk about, while changing layers, restrict to filters. I'm going to talk about filters, but I want to demonstrate it with on this Opet setlist that we have created before. Let's talk about this filter. So I'm going to move it up here because when I tap this filter, a keyboard shows up. I'm going to resolve this problem. It's going to go up automatically. So filter is basically the thing that you do when you're selecting presets and stuff like that. When you start typing, you restrict the layers that contains this word here. So it's convenient if you have so many layers and you need to find the right layer automatically. Or if you organize your layers in a different way, like for example, you group them like the first set, second set, third set, and you name your layers with containing those words like first set, second set, then you can just display only the layers in the first set and second set and so on. And this option stays here, so you have to be careful. Right now we are restricted to the layers containing D and E. So if I tap this, it's really not visible. Maybe I should make it visible. There's a cross button here, so I reset the filter. And this option here is related to that. So while changing layers, let me demonstrate with this off. So we have these 3 songs in a row with Deliverance, Serenity, and Demon of the Fall. If I tap D here, the Serenity goes away. It doesn't contain D. So suppose we have this filter now. While this option is off, while I'm in the live console or while I'm changing layers externally using my remote control, so let me show you. I go to the end of this section and the next layer is Serenity. It's not here. So I'm now in the layer Serenity, which is not visible on my layers because of the filter. And I go into Demon of the Fall. And the same goes when I go to previous layers. And the same happens when I use my external control. So I move to next layer, next layer, next layer. But next layer is Serenity. It's not visible here. And next layer is Demon of the Fall. When I enable this option, now my next layer, previous layer actions, as well as my options here, are now restricted to this filter. So when I'm at the end of Deliverance, my next layer is Demon of the Fall, not Serenity anymore. I'm restricted to this filter. And the same goes with my external control. When I'm on Deliverance, when I hit the next layer button, the next layer is Demon of the Fall. And one other thing that I need to mention when about restricting layers, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate here, but when you have this option, or in the custom translators, when you choose the option move to layer at position. So if you are changing layers using values, like for example program change values or whatever, 0 corresponds to first layer, 1 corresponds to second layer, 2 corresponds to third, 3, 4, 5. So it has to go like that. And this option also works in that way. So when I have D here, now 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 goes to Demon of the Fall. If this option is off, 4 goes to Serenity, the hidden layer here. 5 goes to Demon of the Fall, corresponds to the Demon of the Fall. Okay, let's talk about the clipboard and the favorites. So I'm going to start with the basic case. I'm going to go over tracks and parts. So let's create this track, an audio layer. And let's do some customizations here. Let's say, suppose I want to change the output channel, but let's say the input is just the main keyboard. Let's change the color to something else. And let's add a custom translator. So I tap this wheel, copy to clipboard, and just go to another blank song file or any song file. I say paste from clipboard. And it becomes exactly that. So it's just the simple case. And the same thing works for parts. I'm not going to go over too much detail, but let's do a couple of things. Suppose this is an octave and it's auto sustain. Let's go into favorites. Instead, I'm going to save this current state as a favorite. Make a random name. And on this part, I set this A, favorites. Well, since this is on another track, the full state info is still saved, so it should be the same full state. But you can save parts. It stores all the information, including the custom translators here as well. So on the favorites, you can store favorites or you can swipe left to delete favorites. And these are stored globally. This works for all. It works for MIDI channels. It works for So for example, you can do for the same for mixer units. So it's a favorites, let's say mixer. Let's also store this as a favorites. So I create a track here. So it becomes a mixer. It becomes an audio layer with the, this automatically opens. Okay, I need to demonstrate again. So the current state basically rolls back to its initial state. So for example, here, suppose I have a player unit. I go to favorites, mixer, current state is the player unit, or audio layer, or go back to current state. Or for example, you choose the mixer, you have a bunch of lists and you decide to roll back to the initial state. You can cancel and it goes back to its initial state. So yeah, this is the basic structure of favorites. And of course, things get more interested when we go to sections and layers. Now, I have already stored a bunch of section favorites. So every time you go to the favorites menu, if you open it in a section, it shows you the stored sections. If you open it in a part, it shows you, so I already deleted it, but for example here, if I open it in a track, it shows the favorites of tracks. So yeah, I can run the audio layer section here. Okay, for favorites, it works the same way. You can copy or paste, or you can choose from one of the favorites. And you again have filters here, just like that. So let's choose something. So, of course, this section contains some parts which are connected to tracks which has some audio units that does not exist in this song. So it adds those ones and loads them. So I roll back. Let's load something else. Or let's load this one. And actually the parts that are added here. Okay, yeah. And the same logic applies to layers as well. So I already have some favorites stored here as well. So the whole layer is loaded into in place of this one. Okay, there's a small update issue that I need to resolve. It's actually now the layer. So just the name didn't update, but so the basic idea is the same. Okay, but of course there's something working in the background, and so this was the basics about layers. About favorites. Now we go into the advanced section. Okay, to demonstrate the advanced features, the customizations about favorites, I decided to create a simple section with this configuration. So I have Pianotech with multiple inputs, with pitch bands and like these 3 inputs. And if I go to song mixer, this is connected to this mixer, and the mixer has an effect. So I have this simple setup. Now, when I click favorites and save this as a current state, let's call this tests. What KeyStage does is it stores all the information on this section, all the parts it contains, and all the tracks as well, because it needs those information when it does matches. Now, suppose I want to paste this into a song which is slightly different. Suppose we have another song with Pianotech, but it only has the input for main keyboard, and it's not connected to a mixer unit, and of course there's no effect. Now, what KeyStage does is the following. Let's go into this advanced. So KeyStage has an advanced matching algorithm when it tries to add a section from favorites into an existing song. It tries to match tracks of the favorite or the section with the tracks, the favorite tracks, and tries to do one by one matching in a recursive manner and try to find the optimal options. And these criteria, track matching criteria and the actions, if there is no match, determines those algorithms. So let me try to go from one extreme, start with one extreme. But this is the default setup, and I believe these options, this setup is optimal for 90% of you guys. Probably you won't even need to go into this advanced section. It just works the way for your setup. But if you want to go more into the advanced settings, and you just need to do this once probably, and you never look back. But let me show you how this structure works. So if all of them are checked out, what KeyStage does is, okay, looks at the favorites, checks the parts, checks the corresponding tracks, and tries to find matchings for those tracks in the original song. And the only thing that it looks is the output. Whether it's the same audio unit, whether it's the same MIDI output, whether it's a mixer unit or player unit, whatever. And if it matches, that's it. Doesn't care anything about us. And in this case, so remember the original test one has a piano tech, and there is only part corresponding to that piano tech, and that matches. It doesn't care. So now it found a match, and that's it. It doesn't care about the MIDI output or whether it's connected to whether that mixer is connected to an effect or so. So let's roll back. And now let's add a criteria. Let's add the MIDI inputs. Now for certain of these matching criteria, there are certain actions that you can assign. And normally the only action is create new track, but for some of them like this, you can create a new track or add missing input. So what it means is if KeyStage cannot find a match for this criteria in the existing tracks, it just creates a new one because that's what we chose here. So we know that the MIDI inputs are different, and it creates a new one. So remember, this has multiple inputs, but the original one had only main keyboard, so it just says, okay, I need to create a new track, and there is a part here. Let's try one more thing. So, but if I say add missing inputs instead of creating a new track, it says, okay, the matching criteria holds for this because, okay, even if the inputs do not match, I can just add the missing tracks. And now, this turns into multiple inputs. So again, let's roll back. I don't have the undo button, unfortunately. Let's go one more step. Let's say I want to also control the output. Okay, output means whether it's connected to a mixer or it's connected to the directly to the output of your audio interface. This is connected directly to the output, and the other one was connected to the mixer, so this doesn't match. So when I do that, it has to create the piano tech with the mixer. But it didn't add the effects. Why? Because I didn't add the effect criteria into the equation. So let's roll back and say connect effects. Let's say create new track row for now. And when I do this, now it creates a piano tech, connects it to the mixer, and add the missing effects. Okay, let's do another test now. Roll back. Suppose this is now connected to a mixer. So as I said, the algorithm works recursively. So the original mixer unit also has these default outputs. Suppose that this only pitch bend is connected to the output. And let's connect this piano tech to the mixer unit. And let's change this to okay, how was it look like? Let's actually, I don't remember. So we had MIDI inputs. Let's disable these and add the missing inputs. Let's match the inputs for the original track. So yeah, the original track matches. Let's delete this. But the mixer units do not match. We forgot about the connection. And suppose the MIDI inputs requires to create a new track, the MIDI input criteria. But we have also add audio outputs. So what KeyStage does is, okay, it starts searching for piano tech, looks at the piano tech, okay, it matches, the MIDI input matches, and this one is connected to a mixer unit, the one in the favorite is also connected to a mixer unit, and now it compares the mixer units. But the mixer units MIDI inputs do not match. And because of that, it just has to create everything from scratch, because it fails at the second check, in the recursive check. Okay, let's delete these. And so let's add the input criteria again. Instead of creating, I just add missing ones and connected tracks. Add new track. If I keep select add new track again, the match doesn't match. So it has to create everything from scratch because it fails at the last check. But if I change this to add missing effects, it just adds the missing effects because everything is matched. And now we're going to come to that. This effect is bypassed because there's no parts. This is actually a really useful feature, especially when you're adding new favorites. Yeah, this is pretty much it. The logic is the tracks matching criteria are set up here with the appropriate actions. And for me, for example, this is really convenient. The custom translators add missing translators. The missing translator is actually added to the parts, not to the track, so that it doesn't affect the other sections. So MIDI inputs, output channels, dynamic full states. So dynamic full states, for example, this option here, whether the full states in one parts should change, is it dynamic or not? So this property is checked. But if there is no match, enable full states and adjust full states of existing parts. So there are some clever actions going on here with these options. And depending on your setup, you just can adjust. For example, if you color code all your tracks and you want the colors to match, you can just enable this as well. Or name of the tracks. If you name all your tracks, like you give custom names and you want to match the custom names, you can add that as well. Or track parameter CCs or MP properties. And when it comes to layers, the logic is the same. The only difference is some of these criteria are just grayed out because you don't need them. Why? For example, for MIDI inputs. Well, when we add a whole layer, we know that the tracks can have dynamic MIDI inputs. The MIDI inputs can change from layer to layer. So it basically enables the dynamic MIDI inputs and changes the MIDI input for that layer. So we don't really need to do any matching over there. So we have less criteria for layer matchings. And by the way, when we first created Opet setlist and create a layered song, the way that it combines all these songs into layers is based on those algorithms that I just mentioned here. So these options here that you choose for layers also affects when you're combining songs like that or when you're adding songs as layers to existing songs. Okay, now related to favorites, there is one other new feature that I want to show, which is this track order. Okay, so what happens when you add favorites? Let's actually go into that. Let's add something like mental nomad intro. This actually adds a lot of tracks. All the tracks are added at the end of the existing tracks. That's what KeyStage does. And sometimes you want to organize your tracks in a convenient way, like put all mixers together, put all instrument units together, effect units together. And every time you add a new section, the order just goes out of hand. Well, track order basically remedies that. You have this is the default order, but so MIDI tracks are on top, instrument units, mixer units, player units, input units, and so on and so forth. You can change the order by holding and dragging these items. Suppose we want to put instrument units on top and then mixer units. And then we apply, boom. the whole order just changed depending on so the instruments are on top, then the mixer units, and then the MIDI tracks, then player units, and so on and so forth. There is also this option, automatically apply while replacing sections or layers from favorites. When this is on, this also applies for layers as well. When you add some things here, like some audio units are added because we saw the loading screen. When we leave here, all these are just ordered. So for example, the MIDI track is added and some additional plugins are added. And this apply now just hits every time we leave out of the favorites menu. So now we are down to smaller new features, but some really important ones here. Now, I'm going to talk about these rendering options. Now, remember, we have these options, suspend inactive plugins to improve performance and allow seamless transition. As far as I remember, these were added in 2.1 or maybe 2.2. I don't remember. But what it does is, when we have no parts on that section and if the audio is completely off, it stops rendering. And this idle shows up here. These can be independently controlled within each track now. So these options, even if these controls all the track globally, but within each track, you can control whether you want seamless audio or suspend rendering options. So suppose I disable suspend rendering. Now, one thing that you realize is the percentages here. So the DSP contribution of each plugin is now shown on the plugin itself. And you can see that it's now 27-29%. And you can see these two indicators as well. So for this audio unit, seamless transition is on. If I turn it off, now only AU1 shows up. So there is only one audio unit here, and it's currently active. It's currently running with 14% DSP. If I toggle this on, and right now it's only, well, actually this is a small UI glitch. When I tap, it refreshes. Now both of them are running, but since suspend renderings are off, no matter there's part or not, these are always on, and they add to the DSP. But if I toggle this on, so you remember how seamless transition work. So suppose we choose another preset here. So right now, audio unit 1 has this plugin. When I switch to this, it switches to audio unit 2, and then after a while, it toggles off audio unit 1. Why? Because it just alternates between the two when we're moving between two full states. But if I press and hold and move here, right now both of them are active because this is the audio unit 1 is also sounding. And as soon as the volume goes down to 0, the audio unit 1 just disables, goes into idle basically. And here on this section, since there are no parts, both of them goes into idle. So yeah, you can actually see the behavior of audio units from these indicators. And there's one more new feature in the renderings, silent audio if there is no parts. This is especially useful, maybe not for instrument units, but for effect units and for input units and maybe for player units as well. What it does is, if there is no parts, it basically mutes the audio units. Even if I keep and hold a note here, it just mutes. When we go back here, it starts playing. Okay, what is the use of that? Input unit is actually quite convenient because you may use input units for different sections, and I think by default this is silence audio if there is no part is on. By the way, these options are stored on each type. For example, for Hammonds right now, whatever the last state is, it's saved. So every time I create a new Hammond, these options are selected. So maybe I should toggle this off. But for example, for input units, it's really convenient because you don't want to keep this active all the time. And for effect units, this is especially good because let me demonstrate it with THU. This is one of my favorite amp models. And let's connect it to a lead sound on Sunriser. This is so let's check if this is bypass effect if there is no part, because that's how I used it last time. So let's move here. Let's choose a lead sound. And let's connect this effect to Sunriser. Right now there is metal tone, but it's not affected because it's bypassed right now. But the moment I create a part here, you see whenever I go to another section with no part on it, the effect is bypassed. And talking about bypassing effects, we have another new feature, which is effect mix. So now you can control the mix of the effects, and mix 0 means bypass, full mix means all the signals are passing through, and you can choose any level between. And this is a parameter on effects, and right now these are added here on the effect mix like this. And the dynamic properties of effect mixes can be also controlled between sections and layers like that. So for example, you can have toggle full states off. So you can change the level of the effects here between sections and between layers. And by the way, the idle mechanic now also came to effects. It wasn't actually the case in the previous version. So this actually works really well, because even if there's a part right now on this, so this now also has suspend rendering when not in use option. When this is on, the effect is idle as long as it doesn't receive any audio signals. The moment it starts receiving audio signals, it activates, and when it stops receiving signals, it just goes into idle. And so let's say we add some release here, like this. So it actually checks the audio signal, not the MIDI signal that I'm playing. So I press. After the release goes below a certain level threshold, it goes into idle. Another feature that I want to talk about is here. So on these parameters, either audio unit parameters or track parameters, well, for audio units it doesn't work right now because there is a full states. Well, let me only demonstrate on the units volume right now. Let's forget about this effect now. Oops. You see the automatic ordering is active, so that's why it's every time I go into favorites and then out, it just reorders. So let's actually toggle full state off, and I'm going to demonstrate here. Now, suppose I want to go to this section, reduce the volume, but I want to do it gradually. So what I do is I assign a duration here. Let's say around 2 seconds. So now, in 2 seconds, the volume goes from this level to that level. And it doesn't matter, like, for example, now it goes from this to that level. So it's assigned to this part. And it also works for audio parameters, but it only works when the part has no full states. Because for full states, these parameters are sent, the parameter information are inside the full state, so we cannot control them gradually. So, for example, here, let's choose a parameter. Let's see. Change something here. I want to do this. Yeah. So filter frequency. Change the resonance a bit. Let's keep it here. The volume. So let's toggle off the volume. So when this is off, this also doesn't apply. Right now it's instant, but now I want to change the filter in a long duration. Let's choose something like 5 seconds. So yeah, you can apply these gradual changes to parameters and also to MIDI parameters as well. If you have a MIDI hardware, you can also do these gradual changes to MIDI parameters. There is one last feature that I want to talk about. To show that, I'm going to open this Opet set list. This was a request by one of you guys. Some of you like to use KeyStage like a sound module where you want to assign sections as combis, like for example with splits and layers and everything, and you want to dynamically choose between sections. The layer structure makes it easier to organize those combis into different layers. So that's one thing. But one thing that one of you guys was asking is, so he was using his keyboard to select those combis, those presets or whatever, using program change and bank select signals. And he asked me whether it's possible to select a section using program change and bank select messages. And every time he changes the order of these sections, the assignments just fails. The assignments just match off. Okay, to remedy that, I added this new feature, MIDI identifier. So each section now has MIDI identifiers. So MIDI identifiers are the program change, MSB and LSB messages. So how does it work? First of all, so you can assign these to sections like that. And you can manually do that, or you can tap MIDI learn, and suppose your keyboard has those buttons which sends those program change band and bank select messages together as combi signals. So you press that signal and the MIDI learn. I won't be able to demonstrate it here on because I don't have a keyboard like that. So I'll just talk about it. So by either using MIDI learn or using these manuals, you assign those program change and bank select messages to these sections. And then when you go to external MIDI control, so you have these options to change sections, layers, and songs. But in the sections, we have a new button here. Change sections with MIDI identifiers. So what this does, when this is enabled, KeyStage, so when it receives, again from these MIDI inputs, when it receives program change and bank select messages, it first checks the MIDI identifiers of all these sections. And if there is a match, it directly goes to that section. And if there is no match, then it looks at the other parameters with layers and sections. This basically allows you to assign buttons which send program change and bank select messages to sections here. And even if you change the order of these sections, it directly goes to that section and to that layer if it's in a different layer. So yeah, this was another feature request. And I think this is pretty much it. There might be some things that I might have forgotten, like some very small changes and things, but I can talk about them later. And yeah, I think this is the end. So I'm waiting for your feedback, for your crash reports, and for your other feature requests. And as I said, if they are not too complicated, if they won't take too much time, I can try to add them. But yeah, this is all for now, and good luck testing, and I hope you enjoy it.